Okay, so you did go into 2016. How would you say since 2016 our country's changed, not only politically but on a societal level?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple things. Let's remember, since 2016, right, we've gone through the Trump thing, back, forth, and maybe even back again. Who knows what's going to happen? We've gone through COVID, right? Let's appreciate COVID was devastating to this planet. COVID was the only time in the really modern history of the planet, really ever, the only time in the history of humankind, where virtually every single person on the planet was dealing with effectively the same crisis at the same moment. At the same moment, I mean within a month or so, right? It spread so far, so fast. Everything was getting shut down in Asia, then Europe, then it hit America, and things. And so no one had ever dealt with anything quite like this in the modern age. And that was devastating in many, many ways. We learned a lot from it, but boy, it really, everything from the inflationary pains that we're all feeling nowadays, the political strife, I think, that came from that. I thought 2020 was just a horrible year, right? So many negative, tough things had to happen. I'm a little different because as a governor, if you remember, the legislatures went away. The U.S. Congress disappeared. It was the 50 governors working with the president at the time that really, for about the bulk of all through 2020, had to drive everything. My legislature didn't come back into session until the following year. I think that was the case in most states. So through executive orders and states of emergency, the 50 governors and the president kind of had to drive everything. So my experience was very different. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, by the way. I can tell a lot of stories of COVID and how we dealt with it and the mentality there. But I think COVID was just such a turning point for folks. And so when I think of 2016 to today, I think of pre-COVID, post-COVID, and mostly post-COVID, because it's all about what we're doing tomorrow. I try not to harp on the negativity of the past, learn from it. We went through the January 6th nonsense and the election denial on the political front. That was really hard for the country to see. We all want to make sure that doesn't get repeated again in any form. And it won't. I mean, it really won't. I really believe that this country goes through a lot of turmoil, but democracy's strong, right? Look, at the end of the day, you know who gets to decide who leads this country? You and your parents. And I mean, everyone votes. The voters decide still, and the institutions are very strong. Everything we've gone through, right? So let's go way back in history. This country is almost torn apart with a civil war. The institutions stood strong. It's tough, but we came through it. Lincoln's assassinated. Congress and the institutions, government doesn't fundamentally change. That checks and balance is still there. That's very reassuring. World War I, World War II, the racial strife of the 60s, RFK, MLK assassinated in 68. JFK assassinated in 63, right before our eyes, like on television. And people at the time said, it's over. This American experiment is over. We're doomed. This is awful. But we stood strong. We came through it. Tough, but we came through it. We come through 9/11. I mean, could have torn this country apart. It actually galvanized us together in many ways. Come through that very tough and bizarre war with Iraq and Afghanistan. Come through the pandemic. The institution stood strong, right? The Supreme Court, you might disagree with it, what they do. The U.S. Congress, you might disagree with what they do at any given time. The president, you might disagree with their policies and what they do at any given time. January 6th, terrible. We came through it. So, I was at a conference recently. People said, well, what if, we don't want to go back to all that? And I said, of course we don't. But we're always very good in this country. Look at how we even when we have tough times, we always come through it. And I believe we come through it stronger than we were before. So you never want to repeat those things. You want to learn from them. I think we do. Our institutions are strong. Our democracy is very strong. I don't care who gets elected. Guess what? The sun's going to come up on November 6th. I don't care who gets elected. It's going to be okay. I might disagree with the policies here or the policies there. I think it's going to be a bumpy road between November and January. We might have some recounts and all that stuff. That's fine. It's okay. We're going to come through it. It's going to be all right. And so I really try to promote that optimism because history says in America, be optimistic, be hopeful, because we always come through it stronger than we went in.
Mm-hmm. Sure, we do. Yeah. We do come through stronger.
Yeah.
Sure. So you mentioned how 18-year-olds will go and join your legislation. I know I'm hopping a little away from what we've been talking about, but is there a lot of younger... Is there any outreach you do to get in with the younger voters more than...
Yeah, I wouldn't say within the younger voters. I mean, I obviously you want to engage with voters, all voters. I wouldn't say it's a younger voter, so I'm going to tell them this, so I hope they support me there. I spend a lot of time with young people, and it's not just, it could be in my legislature. It could be, we do a lot with things like AmeriCorps, service projects, City Year, Senior Corps. These are a lot of like 1 year young people, maybe 18 to 23 years old, doing a year of service. They come through New Hampshire a lot. Those are the groups I actually really like to engage with because they're young, they're energetic, they're working hard, they're trying to find their path, and they always have something to say, which is great. And so the best thing I can do is sometimes I'll bring them into the State House. We'll put a couple hundred of them in our what we call our reps hall, and I'll just say, I'll kind of do a little spiel, talk about what New Hampshire's about, and then I'll just say questions. I love questions. If some 18-year-old from Tennessee is spending the summer in New Hampshire and they get a chance to ask the governor a question, it's probably something pretty important, probably something really on their mind. So by listening to the questions I'm getting, it allows me to understand what the priorities, especially generationally, are. Sometimes it's on a specific issue, but sometimes I always tell people, ask me anything you want. I am an open book. And if I don't know an answer, I'll say, I don't know, by the way. That's okay. It's okay not to have every answer. But I love taking questions from younger people especially because it gets me in kind of into the mindset of what their priorities are. I'm a dad, right? So I talk to my kids a lot, but I also understand I'm a dad, so they're not going to tell me everything necessarily what they think, and they definitely don't want to talk politics with me, which is totally understandable. So I do spend a lot of time with young people, but not to earn their vote per se. I mean, I hope they support me, of course, but
it's not the worst thing.
No. But it's that's a nice offshoot. But it's really understanding what their priorities are, and it's amazing whether you're 18 or 80. People want to know that you're listening. I mean, what is social media, by the way? Why is social media so popular? Because we're all praying and hoping that we have something to say, and we're praying that somebody cares. We're praying somebody out there is listening, right? That's human nature, and so appreciate that. And in doing that, one of the things I do is, I could go to the corner office and be in the State House 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, and all that kind of thing. I would not be a very good governor if I did that. The best thing I can do is go out, visit a school, visit a business, go up north, go to the southern part of the state, go to the western part, go to the mountains, go to the ocean, wherever it is, and just be with people. The most valuable thing I can give as a public official is my time. It's really, and that's hard with family, right? But that's the sacrifice to be made. Giving my time and saying, hey, let's have a conversation. What is on your mind? And letting people talk. And I think if there's any secret to popularity or anything like that, it's just treat people with respect. Give them your time. Listen, right? It doesn't mean you should tell them everything they want to hear. It doesn't mean you should just give them the answer that they're expecting. Give them the real deal. People want to be treated as adults and have a good conversation. It's okay to have a little back and forth. As long as you're listening and engaging with them, that can be a really valuable tool. It's valuable for them because they know that, hey, access to government really works. It's not just a bunch of folks sitting in a smoky, dark room in this Capitol making decisions behind everybody's back. We're really engaging with folks. People want to know that part of the system is really still there. So I find that incredibly valuable. And then personally, just hearing what they have to say. Because then I can take that back to the State House and say, hey, I know in education we're thinking that these were the 3 big issues. I visited 3 schools and everyone's talking about these issues over here. We have it all wrong. These are the things we need to really focus on. Let's rearrange our priorities based on what we're hearing. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. You should do that in your business. You should do that in your family, right? It's kind of the same process. You do that as an engineer, right? I design a system. If I hear it creaking over there and something sounds broken over there, I don't go fix that over there. I address the issues. It's telling me something. You got to listen and respond to what isn't working. So it's not rocket science. I think too many politicians overthink things. They get too overly protected by their staffs. They get kind of put in their own bubble. The challenge of this job is saying, look, I know I'm in a bubble. Let me break out of it as best I can, as hard as I can, as often as I can, and just be normal. How many politicians have you seen out there that you're like, is this guy for real? Is this one like, are they just they act like robots. They're just telling you what you want to hear or something like, yeah, just be normal. It's okay. That's appreciated more than anything, I think. And if not, it's not. They'll vote you out of office and you go do something else. That's okay too. It shouldn't be a career anyway. Do the best you can. Maybe you do a good job and they keep you around. Maybe you don't and you get fired. That's all right. Go find something else to do.
Sure, you mentioned a lot that you do go out and try to talk with your voters.
That's what I'm doing here. I mean, this is what honestly, the fact that you're asking these questions, like, I'm taking mental notes. Not just because we're in Concord, Mass, but like mental notes about, okay, I get to sit with an 18-year-old or 16-year-old for a couple hours and just say, okay, what is on there? What if you're asking the question? It's probably similar to all the other 16-year-olds that would ask similar questions. So no, I love it. I love the opportunity to do that.
All right. Well, if you're thinking that, then I'll go off the back a little bit and I'll ask a few more questions here.
Yep.
So you mentioned Twitter. You said it's tough. So how you have your own kids? They talk over they use their Xboxes to communicate with others. Is there anything like you yourself institute? Because I know every parent has different views and different ways of dealing with that. How do you
like controls and guidelines? Common sense, I think. Like for example, what we do is, so my 11-year-old loves to play Fortnite, right? And he's got his computer over here in what we call the homework room. Before my son, my 20-year-old is now a U.S. Marine, so he's off in the Marines. But before he was, he had his Xbox in that room over there. I never wanted the Xboxes in the bedroom or in the basement where we couldn't hear them, right? So everything's on the main floor. So we can kind of hear, just not that we're eavesdropping, but we can kind of hear what's going on, get a sense of the discussions, or are they on with their friends, whether it's the language being used or the influences that are out there and all that sort of thing. So I think Valerie, my wife, and I have done a really good job of just kind of keeping it at arm's length, but never letting it be out of sight. Once it's out of sight, it's out of mind, and then bad things happen. The internet can be a very awful place, especially for little kids, right? Whether it's predators and pornography and all this violence and all that kind of stuff. It's real. I mean, it is real. It is constant. It is out there. So we need to be on alert as parents and kind of instill that sense of caution in the kids. Not fear, but caution. Be aware of what's out there. Be aware that they're predators, and know that, and be smart about your how they handle whether it's with a video game or using the Xbox as effectively a phone or whatever it is, right? So that's all. And again, I didn't grow up with that. I had to kind of figure all that out. I think some social media platforms are really good about instituting and creating their own levels of safety that you can implement for your kids or with your kids. I think some are awful about it. I think some look like they're doing a good job, but they're really not. They're still allowing those algorithms, those targeted marketing algorithms. New Hampshire was one of the first states in the country to sue all the social media companies effectively over targeting young kids specifically, using algorithms, knowingly targeting them with negative mental health effects and emotional effects and all that. And it's, we're going to be aggressive about it. I don't want to take down all the social media companies. I want them to change their behavior. I want them to understand that what they're doing has a negative outcome, and kind of we can all work together, hopefully in conjunction with them, to find the best guidelines, to find the best rules, to create the best opportunities in keeping kids safe. So there's always going to be risks there. Like I said before, everyone has to take responsibility in it. But as a dad, more than anything, I try to keep on top of that. And then how a dad deals with it is different than how the government deals with it, right? The government is not your parent. The government's not your dad. The government shouldn't be your dad. At best, maybe the government should be a good referee, right? But the government is not your parent. The government is not here to solve all your problems. The government is here to create opportunity, not create solutions. You find your solutions, but if I can create as many doors of opportunity for you, your business, your kids, whatever it is, you do you. Live free or die. You find the door that best fits your need in that moment. So if anything, but I'll keep regulations and some guidelines around each of those doors of opportunity, but we're going to let you go and find the path that best fits you. We're not there to solve everything for you. We're there to create that opportunity in a safe way, like a referee, right? Playing the rules. We're going to set the rules. Everyone needs to play in the rules, but go out there and, have fun and be safe.
For sure. I mean, you talk about how everyone uses, all different kinds of people use social media. They do. Do you think people like the president or vice president should be held to a different regard when using social media?
I think they will be held to a different regard and a different standard no matter what. Look, I've worked with a lot of presidents, different presidents and different parties. How Biden handles his social media is obviously very different than how Trump handled his social media and all that. But so they should be, I think they will be held to different standards, but believe me, they're just people. They really are. They're as human as anybody else. They don't have any more experience in this than the average person does. They don't have any more experience doing a lot of things than most anybody does. We're all just very normal, as much as the media and sometimes they themselves try to put themselves on a pedestal. I'm sorry, the last people you should put on a pedestal is a politician. Really, we're public servants. That's our role. We should do the best we can and move on. Anyone who overstays their welcome, and I think you can say most everybody in Washington at this point has pretty much overstayed their welcome, but everybody who overstays their welcome, it's not helpful in the long run. And don't put them on a pedestal. And they put themselves on a pedestal, sometimes through social media and all that. So do we hold them to a different standard? We typically do, but believe me, whether they deserve that or not, I don't know. I'm telling you, they're living a very different life and a very public life, but it doesn't necessarily carry with it more weight, experience, or knowledge base than most anybody else walking down the street.
So you keep saying overstay welcome a politician.
Yeah.
I know some states like New Hampshire don't have a term limit.
Yeah.
But not only that people can stay in office for as long as they want. Some do. Should you cap a term limit? Do you think? But not only that, if you don't cap a term limit, should there be other measures in place to, like, if the politician themselves, like, isn't as good as they once were,
right?
Take them out, and be able to see that and take them out.
Well, look, the best cap on someone's overstaying their welcome is the voter, right? If the voters want to keep putting them in, it's their right to keep doing that. Now, I personally think, specifically in Washington, there should be term limits, but for both Congress and Senate. The reason being is how folks in Washington get elected is so fundamentally different than what happens at the state level with your state senators, your state reps, and even your governor. How they handle money, their campaign finance is a complete mess, right? How they can raise money, use money for advocacy and influence at a completely absurd level to help keep them in office, regardless of anything that they might achieve. It's a real problem. I'm a big believer in campaign finance reform. I'm a big believer in term limits because they do just overstay. It's federal, so that the congressman from Texas, who has never met me, has no interest in New Hampshire or Massachusetts, has a real influence in terms of where we're going with things. So I think that's fine, right? We're a republic and we have a federal government, but all the more reason that those folks should have a term limit. At a minimum, let's ensure that they're getting a fresh set of eyes on things. Not one term per se, but maybe 6 terms for Congress, 12 years, or 2 or 3 terms for the Senate, 12, 18 years. That's more than enough to get what you want to achieve in government done. Anyone who's staying that long, get a life. Really, it's a problem. So yes, I believe the federal government especially should have term limits, much like the president does, which I think works pretty well. We know that because the best and worst that a president can give is 8 years. That's a lot of time to get stuff done, to have influence on a national and international stage, to really drive policy or whatever you want to get done as a president. But then we move them on. I don't know why we'd do it any different for Congress. In New Hampshire, we don't have term limits, but the difference is they get paid $100 a year, right? It's really 400 individuals that are giving just of their time and passion, right? So naturally, you just can't stay that long, or you don't want to stay that long, or, it's just a different culture, I'd say, in New Hampshire, where it's appreciated that it's very rare that people stay more than 3-4 terms or something like that. So I think we just understand that responsibility a little differently. We treat it a little differently. I'm not saying we're better or worse, but we are better. But we just treat it a little bit differently, and so we just have natural turnover. And remember, we have local government. That's where the power really is. What happens at a local level with your local taxes is way more influential on your family or your business than what happens at the state level. The first person to get elected to office in my family was my mom. She had 8 kids. What is someone with 8 kids? What do they get elected to? The school board, right? Because if you want to have a positive impact on your kids and their education and where they can go, you're going to get on the school board and try to drive the best result. So that's I guess where the intro to the politics was a little bit. We all kind of grew up learning. You want to we call it tithing your time. Find your thing. Everyone has a thing, right? You have a thing. Sometimes you know it, sometimes you don't. What's your passion? But you got to give of that to your community. It's fulfilling, it's rewarding, and I believe in the United States, it's just inherent in that whole experiment that we call America, which is, be a school teacher, be a nurse, run for office, volunteer at the food bank, give some time at a nonprofit, whatever it is, find your passion and give some real time to it outside of your family and traditional work. And if everybody does that collectively, everything is so much better off, right? Because we're giving of ourselves, we're giving of our community, we're working together. It sounds corny, but oh my gosh, it makes such a fundamental difference. DC does none of that. That's why I can't stand Washington. They have no sense of that kind of community. They have no sense of that role and responsibility. They don't advocate for it. And because of the new rules around how they get elected, how they raise money, how long they can stay, it's become a place where they just become very disconnected from what's happening here on the ground, and yet they can still keep getting elected for it. It makes it really hard for someone else to break into that, right, as a non-incumbent. So that's why I'm a bit negative. I'm optimistic, but I'm negative in the moment on DC.
So you keep saying you don't like DC, but I mean,
No.
Your brother was a state senator. He was
a U.S. senator. He was a congressman for a while. Yeah.
U.S. senator. Excuse me.
Yeah. John was great. My brother John he's wicked smart. He's a lot smarter than I am. He was a great congressman and a great senator. He left in 2008, and I would argue things started, and I think most people would agree, things really started to go south with that culture in Washington around 2006, 2008, 2010, with social media, with how we started to communicate differently, with larger media becoming less, I think, agnostic and a little more biased to certain things. Both sides, right? Both sides are very guilty of that. And so, I guess he got out, he some of his best friends in the Senate were Democrats, right? And they would work out together and they go for jogs together and they disagree vehemently on the floor of the Senate, but they were friends. And that was fine. We still do that in New Hampshire, right? The Democrats and Republicans, we effectively have a split house. They're all friends for the most part. I mean, even out of 400 of them, it's about 200 on Republican Democrat sides. Everyone gets along. So there are pockets in this country where it's still done very, very well. I think Washington used to do it pretty darn well. Not quite lately. They got to give it a little time and maybe some rule changes there and hopefully bring back more independence, more less political thinking, right? Take the politics out of government. That's the secret sauce. How do you do that? How do you find those moments to be apolitical in what is typically a government or political institution? And if you do that, you can really get a lot done. Yeah.
So you went to MIT.
I did.
You did all that formal education, further education. 94% of, let me get the exact number here. 94% of the United States Congress have at least a bachelor's degree. Do you think, for anyone who might think that they want to have change in the U.S. and want to go into that, you think a bachelor's degree or
no, a bachelor's, a 4-year college isn't absolutely necessary by any means. But doing something is, right? You got to find some success for yourself in something. And by success, I mean time and experience. So people that serve in the military have gone, they literally can go through hell and back, and they serve, they work with teams, they learn to deal with a lot of failure. There's a lot of pride in their country. There's a lot of success there. They make great government officials. If you go right into politics out of college, you're not going to be successful. You could get elected. You could be successful being elected, but that is not success in government and public service. Two very different things. Some people are really good at getting elected and really bad at the job. Some people would be really great at the job, but they just don't know how to get elected. So what we end up with is usually and hopefully folks that are pretty good at getting elected and pretty good at doing the job. And that's not a bad thing. But getting life experience is the most important thing. Again, it could be a job, it could be volunteering at a nonprofit. But you need those soft skills of team building, the soft skills of compromise, the soft skills of learning how to fail upwards, fail well, as they say. Those things are so important. And you don't necessarily learn those there's no class for that at MIT, I'll tell you that. But it's so, so important to get those life skills if you want to go into the public sector and be successful working with people, dealing with constituents, bringing in issues, and challenging yourself to find a better way to do things. It's really, really important. So, no, I don't think you need the 4-year degree to be successful in anything in life. It definitely helps in a lot of things. I mean, I was not going to be a very good engineer unless I got an engineering degree. You're not going to be very good at driving a train unless you go to school to learn how to drive trains. And maybe that's a 4-year college, and maybe it's a 1-year training program. It could be a variety of things. Find your thing, find the training program that best fits, and do it. And if you want to get involved in government or politics, I go back to tithing your time. That's not a career. Don't make it a career. Don't even try to do that. You will fail. And you won't just fail for yourself. You could be successful personally, but you'll fail in the mission of providing for your community, right? You got to have those soft skills, and that only comes with real world experience. And take your time. You're young. A lot of kids may come out of college and they work on campaigns, and they've worked on campaigns and they become a campaign manager, and they're on the staffs and they think they're ready to run for office because they worked for a politician. It's actually the worst thing you can do. You're in the bubble, right? That's not reality. Reality is, again, going to work every day, dealing with real issues and all that sort of thing, dealing with real people outside of the political sphere, and then taking that experience and bringing it into the State House or bringing it into the school board or whatever your passion might be. And make sure what you're running for is your passion. Your passion should be the service, not the politics.
So we're running out of time here.
I'm sorry, I talked too much. I could go on. This is fun, by the way. You're very good at this. For your first show, this is really great.
That means a lot. A lot. I got a few more questions, but from what you just said, I do have one question.
Sure.
So, there are some political families which I can think of. Again, not going to name names. I like most people. I like to think that way, not to be negative. But there are some families who are career politicians. And do you think that, from what you just said, that they wouldn't be as good in politics?
No. So a couple things. So, for example, let's talk about the Kennedys, right? The Kennedys and the Sununus politically probably don't agree on much, but they're all great friends of mine. They really are. The Shrivers and the Kennedys, we all get along. I was literally in Ireland on an economic development trip 2 weeks ago. You can see this on my social media. 2 weeks ago, and I heard someone go, "Hey, Governor, is that you? I'm in a pub on my last night there having a Guinness with a bunch of folks that we had kind of finished up with." And I turned and it was Ted Kennedy Jr., who's a state senator. I think he still was a former state senator, but I think he still is. He was over there happened to be in Ireland, coincidentally, with a group working on inclusion, right, for the disability community. It's something I'm very passionate about as well. And I'm like, "Ted, what are you doing? This is incredible." So we sat there and we had a great conversation. Again, we've become very friendly. Because our families are kind of known, I mean, I'm not comparing the Sununus and the Kennedys, but, there's been a few of us Sununus and obviously quite a lot of Kennedys or the Bushes or the Clintons. It doesn't mean they're not good and not worthwhile. But I think, if anything, as individuals, we should have to prove our muster a little more. We shouldn't get the job because of our last name. Of course not. You got to prove it. I mean, I've been pretty successful in 4 terms. That's not because my dad was successful in the 80s, right? Mm-hmm. I think we've engaged with the people, and I kind of stand on my own 2 feet, and I believe what I believe, and maybe you agree, maybe you don't, but I embrace and I love the philosophy of New Hampshire and all that, so it works. But it has to work. You have to prove it for you as an individual, and I think that barrier's a little bigger. So it doesn't mean they wouldn't, that folks with my family type of background wouldn't be good in politics, but I think you should put them through the ringer and make sure they're earning it, not just on their name, but on what they're trying to deliver and what their experiences really are.
So this next question, I didn't come up with this question. This question came from my mom.
Nothing like throwing mom under the bus.
So she wanted me
Maybe she's not watching. We'll see.
Maybe not. You never know. But she wanted me to go a little heavier into this. I took some from away from it. But she wants to know if you feel the Republican Party is going in the right direction right now.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't want to say it's going in the wrong direction. I don't want to imply that. It's not going in the direction I'd like it to see. I do think it's temporary. I think it's defined by a couple individuals and a couple things that are not typical of the Republican Party. I'm a kind of a classic Republican in that people will call me like a Reagan Republican. I believe in fiscal discipline, right? There's nothing, and I'm going to harp on this a little bit, there's no greater responsibility than managing other people's money, right? And that's what the government does. You worked for that dollar. You sweated out at work. You took time away from your family doing a job you probably didn't really like. You earned probably not as much money as you thought you were worth. And then you gave a huge portion of it to the government, praying that they spend it wisely and do right by it. That's a huge, whether it's in the public or private sector. I ran a business at a ski resort. I had shareholders that invested in my business, right? I had customers that were buying a ticket. I always felt the responsibility of delivering the best I possibly could on that dollar. So I carry that very respectfully in government, I think there's a lot of Republicans that aren't even there anymore. It's really frustrating. I believe in limited government. I believe in local control. I think less government is more opportunity, more economic opportunity, personal liberties, right? The good and the bad that comes with that. Usually far and away good comes with that. So those are my kind of philosophies, not completely shared with certain leaders within the Republican Party, but we're a spectrum. It's okay, right? There's always a spectrum of conservatives, more extreme type folks, more moderate type folks, more libertarian leaning type individuals. Sometimes different ones of those pieces of those spectrum take leadership roles, right? Trump has taken a leadership role lately, specifically, not because of his policies. I agree with a lot of his policies, not all of them, but a lot of them. But he's more taking a leadership role because he's tapping into something emotional with Americans, a variety of Americans. It could be anger, it could be both pride in the country, it could be anger at where things are going. It could be a lot of different things, but that is his a secret sauce, if you will. Like him or hate him, he has a way of connecting with people on a gut level, which is an amazing given, he's kind of this billionaire, semi out of touch of a lot of things. But he has really connected with folks. So I don't agree with all those policies that he might bring to the table. I don't necessarily agree with, a lot of the personality that comes with that and the blusteriness. But even the things I don't agree with, I don't think it's the end of the Republican Party or anything like that. You could have the exact same argument, by the way, for the Democrat Party, right? The Democrat Party right now, generationally, you have young people that are out there. I mean, I go crazy when I see the support of Hamas. I'm Palestinian, and my family is from Palestine, lived in Lebanon, but and what I see with young people doing this pro-Hamas stuff, these are terrorist organizations that want to kill us. Like, make no mistake about it. I think the Democrats have a progressive what are they going to be defined as? Not so much on the leadership side right now, but very well that could come. So I think both parties have to be careful when extremists get a hold of power. It can happen. Don't let it get you down. It's usually temporary, right? So different wings or extreme factions of both parties can take leadership roles. That doesn't mean it defines the party completely, into perpetuity. The challenge for people like myself is to always make a better argument. Put up better candidates. I was a big supporter of Nikki Haley in the primary, and we came close. Nikki lost by only a few points in New Hampshire, and didn't quite have it. Trump had really connected in a way that a lot of us were pretty astounded by. But he went through the process in 27 states. We had Nikki challenged him, and he won the votes. He won the primary, fair and square. Not the result I wanted to see, but it was a process. You know who decided who won? Not the party, not even Trump. The voters. The voters chose him. I might disagree with that, but the Republican voters at least chose him. Can't quite say the same for the Democrats right now, and I think that's kind of a challenge we're going through. It's a very unique year that way. But long and short to the point of your question, while I don't like where the party is, necessarily love the leadership at this point, might not even agree with it on a policy basis, it can always change. And that's up to us, as Republicans or whatever, to change. I'm not my job to change the Democrat Party, but within the Republican Party, be a leader, find leadership, believe that, again, be that optimist, believe that, just because you don't like the situation today doesn't define you. You want to make a difference, you want it to change, go be part of the change.
All right. Speaking of the Republican Party, you were pushed pretty heavily to be the nominee for this year's...
In 24.
This year's presidential nominee. You didn't accept it.
Yeah.
You're backing out of politics, taking a step away for a little while. You think there's a possibility that in 2028 we could see a Sununu presidency?
Oh, well, no. Nothing I'm thinking about right now. I thought about it in 24. I really did. At the time, there were a lot of people running. And I thought, I don't want to be the 13th candidate running, per se. Also, New Hampshire's different, right? New Hampshire has that first-in-the-nation primary. I mean, a lot of folks from Massachusetts come up and participate in our process up there. Not vote, but they meet all the candidates. They kind of put them through the ringer. It doesn't matter how much money you have or name ID. You got to go through. Like, when I was with Nikki Haley on the trail, we were doing 10 stops a day. Dunkin' Donuts, a nursing home, a child care center, whatever it was. We were just going from event to event to event, meeting people. Not talking at them, but listening, to them, and it worked. And her numbers went, from virtually nothing to skyrocket, and didn't quite get over the line at the end. So we have our first in the nation process, and I realized as governor, again, my job's to be a good referee, the best host and referee I can, so all the candidates have a really good shot, as best of a shot as they can. At the end of the day, I ended up endorsing someone because I really believed in Nikki, and I'm kind of transparent that way. People said, are you going to endorse? I said, well, I guess when I figure out who I'm voting for, I'll let everybody know. That's just the way I am. So it's a great process. It works really well. 28, you know what, all I'm looking at right now is going back into the private sector, maybe making some money and putting my kids through college and paying the mortgage and all that kind of thing. So, like I said, keep yourself open to any opportunity that might come. I don't know what's going to come down the road. And if you try to overplan it and overschedule your life, especially in this day and age when so much can happen in a positive way to you, you're going to block yourself off from what might come. So who knows?
Well, thank you for taking the time to come.
You bet. This is really great.
I think it's been a good episode.
I think it's been a great. Personally, I think this has been great, and you've warmed me up. I know that I get tours in all the time to the State House, like fourth graders. Our fourth graders all across the state come in, and the toughest questions I get asked is from those fourth graders because they are completely unabashed and will ask you the most amazing, ridiculous things that you can ever imagine. So you're by no means a fourth grader. You're much more put together than that. But at the same time, I always find conversations, I got to be on my toes, right? Your generation has a whole different perspective on things. I never know what's going to be asked. I never know what's going to come at me, which I love, but actually with the thousands of interviews I've done, I always get a little bit nervous. So thank you for going easy on me. I'll be on CNN and Fox tomorrow, and I'm sure there'll be a breeze compared to this. This is great. This is a lot of fun.
Save the best for first, right?
There you go.
Okay. I also want to thank Minuteman Media and WIQH for allowing me to make this show. And to you, the viewers, I want to thank you for listening, and I hope we can see a better tomorrow together.